Russia shells Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv, and accuses Kyiv of killing 4 civilians in the south of the country.
Russian forces advance around the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut in Donbass, leaving a trail of destruction, despite retreating in other areas of the country.
EU leaders failed to impose a cap on surging gas prices, but agreed to work urgently on protecting supply and reducing demand.
The killing of 12-year-old Lola in France sparks a debate over illegal immigration, with the far right holding a protest in Paris.
Russian troops have once again shelled Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, and Zaporizhia, the capital of one of the Ukrainian regions illegally annexed by Moscow. At least 9 people have been wounded. Critical infrastructure, including several administrative buildings and an industrial facility, have been damaged. In Zaporizhia, Russia used S-300 missiles. They say they've destroyed a military hangar. Despite the realities on the ground, the Kremlin has said it's not against discussions with Kyiv.
Putin, in fact, has been open to peace talks from the very beginning. The president has repeatedly said so himself. In this respect, nothing has changed. Only Kyiv's position has changed, because the Ukrainian side has enshrined not continuing talks with Russia in its position.
Many in Ukraine fear that Russia will reopen the northern front line and attack from the Belarusian border with the help of Minsk's army. A move the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko strongly denies will happen. British secret services say an alleged covert mobilization and the creation of a joint Russian-Belarusian force is an attempt to distract attention from the Ukrainian army, which is preparing to recapture Kherson in the south of the country. According to the Kremlin, thousands of inhabitants there are being evacuated, but Ukraine has labelled this deportation. Moscow has also accused the Ukrainian army of killing 4 civilians by shelling a bridge used for moving these people, an accusation Kyiv denies.
Russian officials continue to accuse Ukrainian forces of shelling the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant and have widely circulated graphics depicting the flood path in the event of a dam breach. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials say that Russian forces mined the dam of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, warning of devastating consequences. Now, the dam is under Russian occupation, but Ukrainian forces are closing in here. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant holds over 18 million cubic meters of water, which would cause massive and rapid flooding of more than 80 settlements along the Dnipro River, including Kherson city. With a pre-war population of over 300,000 people, only about 100,000 remained here. Ukraine's president said if the dam is destroyed, it could devastate the water supply to much of the south and leave Europe's biggest nuclear plant at Zaporizhia without cooling water. The Ukrainian leader also said that if the dam is destroyed, then the North Crimean Canal would simply disappear. Now, it provides Russian-annexed Crimea with the reported 85% of its water supply. The Institute for the Study of War reiterated that according to its assessment, Russia is likely continuing to prepare for a false flag attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. Russian sources are likely setting information conditions for Russian forces to blow the dam after they withdraw from western Kherson region and accuse Ukrainian forces of flooding the Dnipro River and surrounding settlements, partially in attempt to cover their retreat further into eastern Kherson region. Continued Russian preparations for a false flag attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant is also likely meant to distract from reports of Russian losses in Kherson region.
After a series of advances at the start of the war, Russian forces in recent weeks have been forced to retreat from many of their early gains. One exception is the eastern city of Bakhmut, where Moscow's off-the-books mercenary force, the Wagner Group, continues to advance. And with it, the residents who remain suffer daily strikes against their homes. Bakhmut was once home to over 70,000 people. Now it's estimated that only 10,000 remain. For these few, life has become a never-ending ordeal.
We are tired, so tired. We have lived in this hell for 8 months since the war started.
It's very hard because we don't know who is shooting and in what direction. We're trying to survive. We live under the bombs.
Just like the previously besieged city of Mariupol, the scars of Bakhmut's struggle are everywhere to see. Ukraine's military has had much to celebrate recently, with massive gains in the northeast and south. Yet here they are under strain and fighting fiercely to retain control.
EU leaders reached an agreement in the early hours of Friday morning to work urgently on developing a gas price cap and also to Europeanize a model similar to the Iberian exception that limits the influence of gas prices on the electricity market.
There
is a strong and unanimously shared determination, as the written conclusions show, to act together in Europe to achieve 3 objectives: lowering prices, securing supply, and continuing to work to reduce demand.
We are aiming to make available up to around 40 billion euros of funds that are still available from the previous MFF. So with that, member states will be able to help the most affected by the energy crisis, be it the vulnerable households or SMEs. But indeed, more is needed to support small and medium companies, but also larger industry to deal with the high energy prices. And here the topic of investment is very important.
Further discussions are due to take place at a meeting of energy ministers next week. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz also said leaders might need to hold an emergency summit in November.
The European Commission has denounced as inappropriate a Hungarian poster campaign that compares EU sanctions on Russia to bombs. The poster suggests that it is not the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but Europe's response that's responsible for Hungary's plummeting economy. This is despite Prime Minister Viktor Orban voting through Brussels' latest measures.
It would be good to have an honest conversation, a clear analysis of what we have achieved with these sanctions. At the moment, the European economy is on its knees, and the war in Ukraine has been going on for hundreds of days. It's time for everyone here in Brussels to wake up. We should not force a failed sanction policy that has harmed only Europe.
The relationship between Orban's Fidesz government and the EU has never been smooth. Last month, Brussels cut 7.5 billion euros in funding to Hungary for breaching, quote, core EU values. But with Russian missiles destroying Ukrainian neighbourhoods and killing tens of thousands of people just a few hundred kilometres away, many view the anti-Brussels campaign as beyond the pale.
Not as a politician, but as a human being, as a mother, as a parent. I think it's evil. At a time when small children, families, innocent people are dying in Russian bombing, to launch such a poster campaign is simply villainous. Even I didn't expect such a thing from Fidesz until now.
EU sanctions need the approval of all 27 member states, including Hungary's. Critics of President Orban say it's a cynical bid to ensure they keep receiving EU funds.
Supporters of the French far-right politician Éric Zemmour gathered in Paris to denounce last week's brutal murder of 12-year-old Lola. They say the killing should be a wake-up call for authorities to enforce immigration laws after it emerged that the Algerian woman charged with the crime had overstayed her visa and had been ordered to leave the country. The government has acknowledged that it must do better, but deputies in the French National Assembly are split over drawing political conclusions from the tragedy.
We all bear the responsibility collectively. We are taking the necessary decisions on the question of people ordered to quit the country. We are taking the necessary decisions on psychiatry, which has been destroyed in our country for years.
I'm quite prepared to talk about the issue of immigration, but doing so with the emotional overhang of this tragedy risks altering the judgment of those who have to legislate or take decisions.
Lola's body was found in a trunk in front of her home. The location has now been flooded with flowers and tributes in response to the senseless murder. The political reaction, however, has been less united.